So thanks for taking some time to talk to me about your new book. I've been looking forward to seeing this for a while. I didn't expect it to be this thick.
Yeah,
How long have you been working on this?
4 years. It was sort of a lifelong project, really, because I've always thought about moral issues from a secular perspective since I started in the skeptical science business. Right. And so really this was kind of an extension of all my other books. And then I just sort of got carried away. There's a lot to cover. I mean, human rights and civil liberties and women's rights, gay rights, animal rights. Before you know it, you're doing all of history, psychology, and it's 450, like almost 500 pages. So, whoa.
Well, yeah, and once you start down this road, you can't leave really any stones unturned.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't cover everything, but I try to cover the basics. So, I have to have a chapter on a theoretical model framework around the whole thing. In other words, as a secularist non-believer, why should we be good to other people? You know the arguments, without God, anything goes. Well, that's not true. Okay, then what's the basis? What's the basis for morality? Why should I be nice to somebody? That sort of thing. So I have to structure all that and then deal with all the moral regress. What about evil? What about violence and aggression? And why do people do the Nazis? That inevitably comes up. So you have to cover all that.
Yeah, I want to come back to some of that in just a minute because I think, like, for a lot of people, let me just open this up. For a lot of people, those issues aren't so obvious, and I was confronted by some of those questions as well this year. Let me start though with the title, The Moral Arc, which was popularized by Martin Luther King Jr. Speaking of the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice. It's an interesting choice from my perspective, just because it does tend to almost feel like it's an expression of hope, for one thing, it seems to me, and one could even say like almost a kind of religious hope for some people. They would make that connection. Mm-hmm. So why do you choose this title or this concept to sort of anchor the book?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the wording. The phrasing is good, which King did too, and he got it from a 19th century abolitionist named Theodore Parker, who was also a preacher, who was preaching against slavery just on the eve of the American Civil War. So talk about optimism.
Right.
I mean, his quote was a little bit longer. My eye reaches but little ways, but from what I can see, it looks like the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, and that's where King got that. But King, you have to remember, although he was a preacher, he was pretty liberal in terms of theology. His main influence was Gandhi, nonviolence. His was more of a political than a religious revolution, civil rights, civil liberties. And although he spoke in religious tropes and metaphors and so on, and it's peppered throughout all his famous speeches, but really what he was talking about are things that are not really in the Bible. The equal treatment of everybody under the law, voting rights. These things are not in the Bible. The Kantian idea that people should never be a means to an end, but are ends in of themselves. Right. Those sorts of things are found in Enlightenment. They were invented in the Enlightenment, the invention of human rights. And so I have a whole chapter describing that and then another chapter describing what everybody thinks, which is moral progress is due to religion. And I think the reason for that is because religion is the one institution most closely associated with morality. So if there's any moral good, everybody attributes it to religion without thinking much about it. Right. And then, okay, if religion's not the cause, then what is the cause? Where did all this good news come from? And I claim it's from secular governments, secular ideas like rights, and secular institutions that say it doesn't matter what your religion is. This is the way people should be treated, and if you live here, you better do it this way because this is what our Constitution says. And you can be an atheist or a Buddhist or a Catholic. It doesn't matter. These are the rules, and that's a new idea that was just invented recently in the last few centuries.
100 years, yeah. So let's get into this one question that you and I have obviously encountered a lot, you much more than me, that morality is not possible to discuss without an objective source. A lot of Christians have said to me this year, as I've been exploring secularism, atheism, and sort of religion and the limits of religious ideas, that unless there's an objective basis for moral judgments, that there is no defining right and wrong, that right and wrong is completely subjective. And so I've had two responses to that, and I'm curious kind of to hear what you think, and obviously you talk about this in the book. That one is that perhaps Christians are right, that without that objective source in a concept of God, that it is more or less subjective. Not sure that maybe that's not a bad thing. Or is there an objective source for a secular morality? Do you see that there is a kind of secular objectivity?
Yeah, that word objective versus subjective, it makes it seem like, the way it's discussed anyway, like one is real and the other one is anything goes.
Right.
One means you're a moral person, you believe in morals. The other is you don't believe in anything. Okay, so first of all, this is an artificial dichotomy, because Christians don't get their morals from some objective source. They claim that they do, but when you press them on it, like, well, so how do you know what's right and wrong? Well, I get it from the Bible. You mean the book that says slavery is okay? Well, we don't believe that. It's like, okay, so
how did you know?
Yeah, how do you know that was wrong? Because pretty much everybody before a couple centuries ago thought it was perfectly fine, right, including fellow Christians. And by the way, in my chapter on slavery, I point out that although it's true, a lot of abolitionists were religious, like William Wilberforce, who led the whole anti-slavery movement in England. But who were his opponents? Who were the people that he had to fight most against? It was his fellow Christian, right, who totally believed it. So there is no objective morality anyway, even for Christians. I mean, they can just say it, but it isn't true. And how did you decide that that abortion was wrong, or that the tax rate should be this or that, or that women should be treated equally? Is that is that in the Bible?
Right.
No, most of the stuff is not in the Bible. Okay, well, I get it from God. Well, you talk to him and ask him, and he answers. Right. How does he feel about immigration? Right. Where does he stand on healthcare reform? I mean, these are moral issues.
Economic inequality.
Yeah.
Pollution.
Okay. What's your opinion on that, and where'd you get that opinion? Because it isn't in the Bible. Okay.
Right.
Now, as for then if there's no objective values, everything is subjective. No. So I build the case that we evolved a moral sense as social primates. We have to have moral emotions in order to get along. Those emotions are very real, and everybody knows what they feel like. The burning hot sensation of jealousy if you feel you've been cuckolded by your partner. The sense of outrageousness if your business partner or somebody you have a contract with violates the contract, steals money from you, robs you, or something like that. Those emotions that come out are very real, and everybody feels them. We all know, when we've been wronged and what that feels. We know it's wrong. There's no, oh, that's just a cultural, baloney. Tell that to my fist for cheating me.
Right.
So and that goes all the way down to primates. We know in experiments where primates get cheated out of something that they did work for, then they feel robbed.
Right.
So that's an evolved thing that goes back millions of years, simply by the fact that in order for us to all get along, there has to be some rules. And to avoid the problem of free riding and cheating, there has to be punishment of free riders and cheaters. So you have the negative emotions that come out, like jealousy and guilt and fighting back against bullies and things like that. And then the positive emotions, I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch mine.
Right.
And those are so I claim those are as objective as we could get. But by that I just mean they're real. They really exist in social groups that need to get along. If it's just you living by yourself on an island, there's no moral question. You just do whatever you want because there's no one harmed. It involves other people. And whether other people are involved, then we have moral emotions, then we have rules.
So one of the things that you say in the very beginning of the book is that morality goes back to, or our sense of right and wrong goes back to our desire to both flourish, to survive and to flourish.
Yeah, I start with the survival and flourishing of sentient beings. Mm-hmm. So because the other basis of a real morality is that we are real, conscious, sentient beings, by which I mean we can feel, we can sense, we have emotions. And I pick up from the animal rights activist, going back to Jeremy Bentham, it isn't can they think, do they have language, can they use tools therefore we should include them in our moral sphere or not. It is, can they suffer? Can they feel pain? Can they be in agony if we treat them badly? That's what counts. So I just say, okay, yeah, let's just start there. You got to start somewhere. Right. And so I start there, just the most basic biological needs that people have, the feeling of pain and suffering and agony and anxiety and so on that comes from, being threatened, your life threatened, or being not flourishing, starving, lonely, whatever, being wronged. And everybody knows what that feels like. And so I think natural selection vouchsafed those emotions to us. It's just part of who we are. It's in our nature.
It was sort of, so evolutionarily we have become adapted to survive and to flourish in these ways, which means treating each other with respect.
Well, you have to a certain extent. Now, of course, there's always exceptions. Well, I know people that don't respect anybody. Yeah, okay, well, there are bullies, there's psychopaths, there are the outliers. Right. That, the sadomasochists, they really don't care. They like suffering or they like torturing people. Yes, it's true. There are a handful of people, but we're not talking about the lifeboat ethics where, just pick some extreme example. Just day-to-day life for billions of people. Most of us know what it feels like to be wronged, and those emotions are real, and that just comes with being a member of our species. Mm-hmm. So, the Enlightenment philosophers talked about natural rights, but they didn't have a good theory because they didn't know anything about evolution and natural selection and how those things come about.
They just knew that it was felt in common.
Yeah,
across cultures.
Adam Smith wrote a book before he wrote The Wealth of Nations. He wrote a book on the moral emotions, the moral sentiments, theory of moral sentiments. It's called, and there he talked about just the sense that I can put myself in your shoes and imagine what you would feel like, and you can do the same with me. It's kind of like the golden rule, but he did it in this thought experiment, and from there he builds a theory of a civil society where you can't just pretend like you care about other people, but deep inside you're a rotten, no good bastard. Because rotten, no good bastards are eventually found out. People know through gossip and just sort of paying attention. That guy, I don't trust that guy.
It's like almost there's an invisible moral hand. It's just like there's an invisible economic hand, maybe, that you can rob and steal and cheat for a while, but the collective will weed you out. Right. Because it's not sociable behavior.
Right. And we kind of know how that works. Like if you're in a relationship and you cheat on your partner, or your partner cheats on you, that can happen maybe once. And then it's like, okay, you have to build trust again. That takes months or years. But if it happens 2 times, 3, 4, and then it's like, all right, you know what? I'm out of here. And that's true with somebody who steals from a business or whatever. It's like you maybe forgive somebody for one violation, but if a pattern sets up, you begin to think, okay, this guy is not a trustworthy member of our group. So one of the things I think religion does is it reinforces the consistency of you as a fellow group member. If I see you every week in the synagogue or the church, you're doing the rituals, you're following the rules and so on, I know I can count on you. You're a reliable person. So one thing religion does is it's a costly signal. It's a signal that you can count on me. I'm a good person. I'm a trustworthy person, especially in this moral environment. There's lots of things that do that, social capital. Just belonging to different social groups. It's just kind of a way of showing everybody, I'm a good guy. It's why one reason we tip. Right. Now you can say, well, okay, why would you tip somebody at a restaurant? Well, my friends are there and I want them to see, and my family's with me. I want them to understand we're generous. This is what we do. Okay, what if you're traveling and you're in a restaurant by yourself in the middle of nowhere? You'll never be there again. You'll never see this wait person ever again. Right. Why not just stiff them? Some people do, but in general we don't, because we have a sense that I have to be really consistent. I have to believe that I'm a moral person. I can't just fake being a moral person, because then people might know I don't really believe it. But if you just live it and do it, then you feel better about yourself, and then you send those signals.
You get a psychological payoff.
You do, and then that is expressed behaviorally that other people pick up on. This is a really nice guy. You can just sort of sense what somebody else is like. Right. So I think we evolved this capacity. Of course, we have a dark side, but this capacity to be genuinely moral and caring about other people. empathy and sympathy. Now that only goes out so far to get out to people I don't know in Africa, say, the nonprofit groups that raise money for like adopting children in Africa, for example. I've done this before, and they appeal to you by showing you one picture. This little, Haji or whatever his name is, and there he is in dirt poor and so on. There's a great moment in that Jack Nicholson film about Schmidt, where he's channel surfing one night and he comes, little Indugu, here he is. If you show somebody a picture of 10,000 starving kids, they just turn the page or they just, it's too much. And there's diminishing returns on how much suffering you show somebody to raise money. And the fundraising organizations, they know, just show one person with a name. Here's his hobbies, he lives here, and here's his brother and sister, and he plays soccer, and he really needs your $5 a month. Right. Can you spare $5 a month? Yeah. And so they're making little Indugo an honorary member of your family, your group, your in-group. I really should care about this person. Not the 10,000 people, out in the desert. I don't even know who they are. But so that's a trick. It's a trick the brain back in our Paleolithic days when pretty much everybody we knew or ever saw was somebody in our group.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask one more question, and then I think, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. And one of my theological heroes back in the day, and I still have a great deal of respect for a theologian named Miroslav Volf. And one of his recent books was Public Faith. And in that book, he argues that faith should play a public role, but not the public role that most people of faith think it should play, which is to control and manipulate the mechanisms of society to create the outcome that people of faith want, but rather that people of faith, if they want to have a public faith, should do so in such a way that it creates what he calls human flourishing. The outcome of it should be to human flourishing. And I picked that word in your book too, and I thought, I wonder, and then you just referred to religion as an in-group that fosters this sort of positive feedback about being loyal and being trustworthy and being a good person. So I guess two parts to the question. Do you think that that's a role that religion could, potentially play in society? And then secondly, do you feel like humanists who don't have religion, who resonate with the message of your book, and others like you that say a similar thing about moral evolution, do we lack structures like church to foster this, or are we kind of all on our own to develop our moral sensibilities?
Yeah, that's a really good two-part question. So the first part, I think most of the modern religions in the West they've gone through the Enlightenment, they've expanded their moral sphere to encompass far more people than their own religious ancestors did just a few centuries ago. And so most Christians today would happily go to Africa and take care of missionary, all that kind of stuff that's just sort of happened over the last few centuries, as the idea came that we should take care of other people, and so that sort of social bonding that happens, and religions are really good at this. I say that's a good thing. I live here in LA. There's we need a lot of people to man the soup kitchens and take care of the poor. As you know, since you work in this area, once in the 80s, once Reagan cut the budget for the mental health care, all those mentally ill people were let out. The schizophrenics are on the street. They need help. All right, who helped them? So religions did it more than anything else, because religion sort of a privatized welfare, Social Security, safety net. So one reason religions have declined so much in Europe is because their governments do it for them. They have a tight safety net. They take care of everything. They have universal health care. In Germany, where my wife's from, you just don't see that kind of homelessness there. They take care of their people. And so what's there for religion to do if people are taken care of and they're happy in their own, they already have tons of social institutions. So a lot of the churches there, I just read a story about the other day, are being sold off just for museums or just to use for other things.
Club venues.
Yeah, club venues, yeah. Because there's really not that much for them to do. And so that's the positive side of religion is that it helps, in many cases helps people. The dark side, of course, is that if you have a tribe, the tribe is defined by its contrast with other tribes. And so empathy which is a good thing for caring about other people, but if there's people that are different from you that you perceive as enemies of your own tribe, then that empathy gets flipped. And then that's where religious violence can come in, or any kind of violence, but religious violence in particular is in the news a lot these days. So, I mean, the problem is, like with the moral arc, with morality, the problem is that there's not enough morality in the world, and we need to give people more morality. No, the problem is there's way too much morality. Everybody is moralizing. I mean, an interesting statistic I discovered in my research was that 9 out of 10 homicides are moralistic in nature. It's very rare that somebody robs a liquor store and kills the guy just to get the money. Most burglars, they don't want to encounter anybody. When they break into your home, they don't want you to be home. They
just want your stuff.
They want your stuff. It's too costly to have to fight for it and kill somebody for it. It's very dangerous. So most homicides are, love triangles, jealousy, spousal abuse. It's, a couple of guys at a bar that have been drinking too much and they're fighting about the football team or honor or whatever. That's what it's moralistic in nature.
Moral outrage.
Moral outrage, yes. I mean, the killers in Paris, Allah Akbar, their moral modules are cranked up to 11. I mean, they're just, totally, this isn't some calculated, we're doing this in order to overthrow the regime or to take power or to steal your stuff. It's to avenge. I take them at their word. I'm avenging the prophet. I believe that's what they believe they're doing. When Muhammad Atta flew the plane in the South Tower, I'm sure his moral module was just cranked up. It's like, I'm doing it.
Yeah, he's doing a righteous act.
Totally righteous, yeah. So the biggest problem we have is that part of our human nature is we have a moral module, a moral neural network, a moral motion, a feeling, a sense that gets cranked up. Yeah. Definitely. So now, as for secularists and humanists, atheists, what do? Well, we have atheist groups and meetings and so on. And I know it's not like religion, and in a way, it's a little bit like why libertarians will never be a big organized political party, because they hate big organized political parties. That's
by definition.
By definition. So in a way, it's like, how come atheists don't have a church? Because we don't like church.
Yeah. No, and I've had people on my blog say, like, I don't need a leader. I don't need someone telling me what to do. I'm independent.
But in fact, they do. Everybody needs a social group. There's a famous book by a sociologist called Bowling Alone.
Putnam, right?
Yeah, Putnam. Yeah, that it's sort of the decline of bowling leagues as representative of social capital. But I think there's 1,000 options, 1 million options for people to now, particularly with the internet. These Facebook meetup groups. There's meetup groups for every conceivable interest, and so people find their social communities, even if it's just online. So I think religion is being displaced a little bit that way, or religions themselves are going online.
I think, too, there's a sense of civic engagement that's generally lacking in the United States. I mean, I have good friends in Australia where it's you must vote by law.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah, it's required to vote. I don't know what the penalty is, like a financial penalty maybe if you don't vote.
All right.
And I don't know that, I'm not saying that's the answer, but in the United States, if it's not a presidential election year, you might get 15, 20%
Yes.
of people coming out to vote. And it seems to me, one of the things that could really reinvigorate the populace is, rather than channeling people's moral energies into new things or starting something else, I would love to see people just more engaged in what's happening in their neighborhood. The local neighborhood group that's going to clean up the park, or, we're having an election for the mayor in Pasadena. I don't know. I just moved here about less than a year ago. I don't know anything about any of these mayoral candidates, but I ought to. I need to go figure that out and make a wise vote. And I just think people are not as invested in the public good, as they could be. And I hope that people could see their participation in civic society as a kind of collective that they're a member of.
I think that's where we're going. I think, in particular, for future moral progress, the last chapter of my book is protopia. Not utopia, not dystopia, but just tiny little steps of progress incrementally.
I noticed that. Did you coin that?
No, that's from Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired magazine.
Yeah.
Just tiny baby steps every day. It's like analogy I make is like the jalopy car of the 1950s, and then people talked about the next step will be the flying car. And
Right.
where's my flying car?
Yeah.
You don't have a flying car, but you have Teslas, and you have navigation systems, and you have anti-lock brakes, and you have air-conditioned seats, not just heated seats.
Wow.
But the new models in 2014 have air-conditioned seats. Yeah. So just tiny little bit. Okay, but more to the point, the stuff like what you're doing, like let's just go down and help somebody that just that guy right there, he needs help. Let's get him mental health help or some food or just specific groups to solve specific problems in society. That's where the action is, I think. And to the extent that religions do that, I know there's this split amongst conservative Christians about should we be helping the poor and solving specific social problems and people that need it, or go off to disaster zones and help people, or should we be worried about the politics of abortion and try to overturn Roe v. Wade and meddle in people's political, social business? And I side with the first. It's like, hey, if religion's going to do something, just at least do something positive, like help people
Towards human flourishing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to the extent that they do, okay, then that's part of moral progress, and I'm happy to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the book before we wrap up?
Well, just glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
It's one thing for me to talk about this stuff. You're fresh out of the religious world, and so
I like the concept. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is being a bridge, a little bit between these two worlds of like morally wholesome religion and non-religion,
Yeah, you're perfect for
and
that.
I think there's a place for us to say, like, you brought up immigration a minute ago. It's a big issue for me. One of the elements of me losing my faith actually was a tour that I took with a human rights group in Ciudad Juarez, right as the violence was getting a little less. So for 3 years in a row, Ciudad Juarez, just across the border from El Paso, Texas, was the most violent city in the world, even more than Kabul or places in the Middle East that are violent, with war going on. And the things I saw there and the suffering that families have endured, and it's such a intersectional set of issues, whether it's the proliferation of guns from U.S. crossing the border regulations, economic disparities on one side of the border and the other, and all this stuff. And I happened to notice as I was cruising through your Protopia chapter, this sort of vision that I also share, and I don't know if I didn't read carefully enough to see if this was something you were like in favor of or not, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but a vision that I see is that we will transcend these geopolitical boundaries in some sense eventually.
Yes, well, I do project that the nation state will dissolve or just sort of fall into disuse.
Not soon enough.
And raise the power of the city-state, just cities.
Yeah.
There's a book called, When Mayors Rule the World. Because mayors, they solve specific problems. Like there's too many potholes, on La Cienega, okay, we got to fix that.
Yeah, who was the politician? I think it was Eisenhower said to Kennedy as they were switching places in the White House that, or maybe it's just attributed to him, that he said, make sure, the thing that I would give you advice is that only the difficult problems arrive at your desk. Because the problems are solved at the lowest level possible,
Yeah.
And you'll never have an easy problem, he said, to solve, and I don't know if that's advice or not, or more of a warning, but it seems like cities are more equipped to handle the challenges. I mean, essentially, my work at PATH, or anybody's nonprofit work that receives federal funding, I mean, the federal agencies basically channel dollars to the people who are actually doing the work on the ground, and that's as it has to be.
Has to be.
Obama can't be, filling potholes personally.
Right.
So.
No, I think, we've gone from thousands and thousands of political units 500 years ago to, just a little under 200 now. There's 196 countries. And so if you follow the curve, it looks like we're going to bounce off the bottom with a one world government. And
in the next 10 years,
I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's bouncing off, and it's already probably going to go back on its way up eventually with smaller political units that are self-governed and just people what people care about is the local community. Right. I don't care what somebody's doing in some other state. Just leave me alone. I just want electricity in my house. I want the roads to be clear and
Right.
just stuff to work.
Right.
And,
And then there's these few things that we share in common, like air,
yes.
water.
Well, okay, right. So there's collective problems like that, but we now have the technologies to, communicate and coordinate global efforts.
Right.
The slight concern I have is obviously religious terrorism in the form of Islam, who, I would like to just open all the borders up, except maybe not because of this problem. But other than that, just let people go live wherever they want. And, just like on eBay or Amazon, just order anywhere you want. So economically, the borders are pretty super
Corporations
porous.
made borders obsolete decades
Right,
ago.
right.
Cool.
So,
Well, thank you so much. This has been fun to
yeah.
chat with you. I can't wait to...
one of the things I do in some
through
of
it.
my talks my debates is to tell the audience members, just try being an atheist or non-believer for like an hour and see how that goes, and then try it for a day and then a week and just see, does the world fall apart? Do you lose all hope? And I bet you won't. And so you're you're sort of our experiment.
It's so interesting because people have really lost their minds over this idea of how can you give up? How can you be an atheist for a year? And then I was, you've said that, I've heard you say that, and I've read John Loftus talking about this outsider test of faith kind of thing, where you basically expose your own religion to the same critique that you would offer, say, Scientology.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you just flip that around and say, if Scientology sounds crazy to you, how would an alien from outer space see your religion, right? So
Julia Sweeney's thing
that
about the Mormons. It
yeah.
only sounds crazy because I'm not used to it, but the Catholic stuff, I'm used to that.
Right. Yeah. That's my story, so it doesn't sound as weird.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it.